Everything Ryan Michler built was shaken, his marriage ended, addiction took hold, and the backlash was brutal.
I mean, I'd wake up in the morning, I would run down to the convenience store, get some alcohol, sit in my driveway before I even started the day and drink, half a pint of whiskey.
Today, the Order of Man founder opens up about his darkest season and how he fought his way back to strength. If you're a man committed to growth, strength, and purpose, hit subscribe and level up with us.
Ryan, welcome back to the podcast, man.
Thanks. It's really good to be here, man. You were on my podcast not too long ago, and so it's good to come back over here and have some deeper conversations.
Yeah. I think it's been about 2 years since both. 2 years since I was on Order of Man and 2 years since you've been on here. You've had a lot transpire in your life the last 2 years. It's been pretty eventful for you. And that was kind of part of the reason I wanted to have you back on. I think you got some new insights, and I've seen even just in your messaging a real maturity and a groundedness with everything that's transpired. Do you mind just filling the audience in? And I think it'd be nice to kind of get into it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously what you're referring to is the divorce that I went through a couple of years ago now. I spent about 6 months trying to rebuild the marriage and fix things. And I think by that time it was too little too late. And we can get into the specifics, but anybody who's been through a breakup or a separation or a divorce knows how brutally painful it can be. Yeah. And it was painful. And I've actually had a lot of guys commend or compliment me, I guess. It sounds weird, on how quickly I've been able to rebuild myself, recover from that. And I'm not here to tell you, I don't have bad days or animosity and contention and all the things that come with it. But it's a little weird when they say that. But it is important to acknowledge and recognize, because that's the power of having systems and frameworks and accountability and other men in your corner, is that when you have these types of events, even if they are self-inflicted, and much of it was the case for me, you're able to rebound, recover, and in a lot of ways make yourself into a better man than you were before. Yeah,
you've definitely done that. I got really upset because when you finally shared about it publicly, you got a lot of flack. I was going through I had to close the browser. I was getting so upset because people were really coming after you, like calling you a phony and a hypocrite and just really careless about it. How did I don't know, did that stuff get to you at all? You've had a bigger platform for a longer time than I have, but I don't know. I was feeling for you, man.
No, not really. There were a couple of comments that were made by who I thought were friends, and even one mentor of mine. Instead of handling it with some class and talking to me directly about it, he decided that he wanted to use the opportunity to throw me under the bus and leverage it and build his own platform off my suffering at the time, even though it was self-inflicted. So, things like that had more impact than just hearing some random guy tell me about why I'm a piece of crap or whatever. But and I will say this, I expected that to be the case. So I had expectations of how brutal it would be. But I also know people are fickle. Social media is not real life. And everybody that's upset today about what I do or what somebody else does is going to be upset about somebody else tomorrow. But I do want to address the hypocritical thing, because that was one that it just wasn't an accurate representation of what hypocrisy is. Hypocrisy is telling people a thing that they should do, an ideology or a way they should live their life, but you believing or knowing that that's not the best way to live. And so you're behaving differently. In the environment that I was in, or the situation that I was in, again, and I'm not trying to pawn this on anybody else or external circumstances, the environment I created in a lot of ways, was not hypocrisy. It wasn't that I didn't believe what I was sharing to be true. It was that I was having a hard time, just like we all do, implementing it. And I think it just goes to show that even when absolutely know all of the right things to do, it still is very difficult to manage, to be consistent with, and to avoid the temptations of addiction. In my case, it was alcohol abuse. And so it wasn't that I didn't believe, it was that I wasn't applying. And lo and behold, I start applying the principles and the systems that we've built over almost 10 years now, and life got better. So kind of interesting how that works.
Yeah. Funny how that works. But I think it makes, it makes sense. The execution is so much harder. I was thinking of, I don't know if you know who Sam Ovens is. He used to have all these ads for consulting.com. He's a high ticket coach and he coached other coaches. And he was big on Facebook ads. That's kind of how he built his empire and made his millions, Forbes 30 under 30. And then he started to do content, and it was all about lifestyle of an entrepreneur and how you got to hustle and grind and you got to have all these habits. And very like anyone who follows Sam Ovens know one day he just kind of like went cold. And he's the guy who created School, which Alex Hormozy's partnered with him on. And
I'm familiar with School. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Sam Ovens is kind of the mastermind behind that one. But somebody asked him what happened with all the content. Like, why did you stop? And why the little cold period before you went public with School? And he's like, I just realized that if I kept doing content like this, I actually had to live by it. And I couldn't do it, it was good content, and the people were benefiting from it. But he's like, man, I can't actually do this. Like, it's impossible what I'm talking about. And I think in his case, like some of the stuff he maybe didn't even believe. He just knew it was going to be good content.
And that is hypocrisy. Now, if he said,
right, that's it.
This is what you should be doing, but at times I fail to do this myself. That's not being hypocritical. It just means you're lacking in execution, which is something that we all suffer from to varying degrees at different points in our lives.
Yeah. And I mean, anyone like you or I who are a content creator and are going to talk about our ideals and, the perfect morning routine or whatever it is, like we're obviously ourselves, we're going to do our best, but we're going to have times or seasons where, things don't go the way we want them to, or we're not going to be perfect. And I think you're right. Like it's important to clarify what hypocrisy actually means. You use the word self-inflicted a couple times to describe the divorce situation. What exactly, you mentioned alcohol abuse as well. Is that primarily what you're referring to?
It is, yeah. And when I was in the throes of my drinking, I was drinking a lot. I'd have a drink on the weekend or something just to kind of let loose a little bit. And I'm really hesitant. I'm not hesitant. I'm just really calculated about the way that I talk about this, because I think when we talk about these circumstances that are difficult to share and bring up, we sometimes have a tendency of leaning towards, this wasn't my fault. It was out of my hands. There was external circumstances at play. And in a marriage, there certainly are. It takes two to tango. I thought, as I was going through this initially, that it was all my fault. And now I see that it's not entirely my fault, but much of my own creation. And so I need to be honest about that. I need to have some humility around that, because if I don't, not only am I not being truthful to the people who are listening to what we do and trying to improve their own lives, but I'm not able to learn for myself what my contribution to the equation resulted in. So I started drinking. I'd have a drink on the weekend just to kind of escape and not worry. My mind's always going. I think for people who are hard chargers and highly driven and motivated and want to start businesses and be entrepreneurs, like we don't shut that off when we have our phones. Ironically enough, I don't even have my phone by me right now. I was going to say, we always have our phones near us. Mine's over there on the desk. It's hard for guys like us to be able to shut things down. So, having a drink on the weekend felt pretty nice just to disengage from all of that. And then that turned into maybe one or two in the evening during the week. And then eventually that turned into, I'll just have one at lunch. And that turned into day drinking. And by the time I really reached the pinnacle of me drinking, and I hate to use the word even pinnacle because there's a positive connotation with pinnacle.
Sure, yeah.
But the time that I reached that peak, or whatever you want to call it, of my drinking, I'd wake up in the morning, I would run down to the convenience store, get some alcohol, sit in my driveway before I even started the day and drink, half a pint of whiskey.
Wow.
Then I'd go in the house and pretend like I was, a good dad and a good husband and a good business owner and a good leader of men. And I would put on that show. And so towards the end of it, I would say pretty much 24/7, I was either drunk, hungover, or passed out. And
wow.
I was able to deceive myself pretty well, because from the outside looking in, things looked pretty good. The business was doing well. The business was growing. I was making money. We were in a dream home in Maine together. All the kids were there. Wife was there. 18-year marriage. Like everything looked really good on the surface, but bubbling underneath was all this contention and resentment, which is, I think, justified in a lot of ways, that was just waiting and bubbling under the surface. And it wasn't until she finally said something that I realized, oh boy, like this is a serious, serious issue.
Okay. And then what, so she basically confronts you on the alcoholism or the marriage itself? What was it like?
Yeah, well, it was the marriage. We were talking on I remember it was a Sunday morning, and I can't remember actually exactly what she said. I was already drinking by that point, and this was a Sunday morning before church, and I was already drinking.
Dang.
And yeah, she said something, and I said, wait, are you saying you want a divorce? And she's like, yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. I was like, whoa. And that was when I stopped drinking that day.
Okay.
I want to say that was like July 31st. And so I stopped drinking. And the next day I went to an AA meeting. I hired a therapist to get some help to work through some of my issues. Like I was serious about changing because I didn't want to lose my family. But I think by that point, and this is pretty common, you can even look at the statistics that by the time a woman brings up the conversation about wanting a divorce or a separation, she's been thinking about it on average for 2 years. So the fact that she brings it up to you and says, "Hey, I want a divorce," like she's not just winging it. She's been thinking about this for years at this point. And it's unfortunate because I think we do have an obligation and responsibility to our partners that we've committed to, that if there's a problem, then it needs to be brought up directly so that you can give the other person, the other party, an opportunity to improve and change and rectify the situation. I don't think it's fair to not allow somebody you've committed to do that before you say, "I'm out."
Yeah.
And it's hard because if you listen to both sides of any relationship, most of it would be like, "Well, most women would say, 'Well, I did tell you.' And most men would be like, 'You didn't tell me.'" That's because of the way that we communicate. You know, if a woman brings up something that she says, for example, she's concerned about, well, a man's going to say, "Okay, well, she's concerned about that. That's fair. She loves me. She's worried about me. She's concerned about me."
It's like a 3 out of 10.
Right. That doesn't mean I'm going to divorce you if you don't change your behavior and then we're going to go through this process. That's not what that means to men.
Yeah.
But if you look at it from a woman's perspective, I actually believe women when they say, "Well, I told him, I said I was concerned." I actually think that she believes she's actually telling him things that are useful for him, but they're generally not. So it's just a difference in communication between the sexes. Yeah.
Why were you drinking? What do you, when you look back, like you mentioned doing some therapy, doing AA, why do you think you were drinking?
I think for me, it was a nice reprieve for me to check out. And then I didn't have to worry about my wheels always turning and my head always spinning. And at the time, Order of Man was really, really taking off. And so there was a lot of demand for my time and attention. And guys might be hearing this and saying, "Well, these are hard problems to have." And they're not. Like, I know they're not hard problems to have, but they're problems. They're things that we as human beings deal with. And I don't really feel like I had a healthy outlet. Alcoholism runs in my family. So there's the predisposition to feel a certain way and have certain behaviors and characteristics towards not only our use of alcohol, but the way our bodies respond to it as well.
Right.
So there's that. And then I have an addictive personality. So I don't dabble. Like, I don't play around in certain things. If I decide I'm going to do something, whether it's something healthy or unhealthy, I am really good at going all the way in. So when people say, "Well, can't you just have a drink?" No. I don't want a drink. I want all of the drinks. And that's where it becomes a problem, obviously.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is a fair question to ask, but you can tell me whether or not you want to answer it. But do you, if apart from the alcoholism, like if you never touched a drink, let's say you identify, "Wow, I'm overwhelmed," you find a healthy outlet to cope with the busyness. Is your marriage still intact today? Like, were there other things in the marriage that the alcoholism exposed? Or do you think it's really the alcoholism that ultimately did damage to the marriage?
It's hard for me to answer that question because I didn't have any sort of problems in the marriage. I didn't feel burdened. I didn't feel like I wasn't in a happy place. I remember having conversations like, "Are we okay?" Because there was some things that I was intuitively feeling. And the response was typically, yeah, everything's good. I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's just a rough season. You know, I've been married for 18 years. That happens, of course.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like there was anything wrong. So from my perspective, so it's really hard for me to say whether or not the marriage, and I can't speak for her. It would be hard for me to say the marriage would or would not be intact. But at a minimum, it certainly exposed and exacerbated underlying conditions or problems within the relationship that may have been there that I was just not aware of.
Yeah.
And at the most, it was exactly the alcohol abuse. And part of it was that I wasn't real present, very short tempered, never abusive. I would say that, and I hate to say, but maybe verbally abusive or emotionally abusive at times in certain scenarios, not nonstop for sure, but never physically abusive, no infidelity, other things that. And I've had a lot of people say that. They've said, "Well, you must have cheated on her because no woman would leave just because you were an alcoholic." And I guess that's nice to say, but
That's crazy
that's
talk.
the reality. So I can only deal with
But
what
also,
I'm confronted with.
why downplay the alcoholism? I mean, the alcoholism is serious. Like, I don't understand
It
why
can
anyone
be
would even say
serious.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very serious. I think a lot of men have it in their head, and I don't know if this is outdated or antiquated thinking. They have it in their head that, hey, look, I'm not beating you and I'm not cheating on you. So, and I'm providing a lifestyle. So isn't that enough? Well, no, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Clearly it's not
Yeah.
enough. But there are millions and millions of men. In fact, many people who are listening to this podcast who actually even subconsciously think exactly that.
You're right. They just don't realize it.
They don't know, but when they're confronted with it, they're like, what's the problem? There's money
Yeah.
in the bank account. We've got kids. Like the mortgage is paid. You know, you seem to be fairly happy. Like it's such a baseline level of
Yeah.
what
Like
is
survival.
good in a marriage that
Yeah.
it's become such a low standard. And I think a lot of that might stem from, I'm not going to say antiquated ways of thinking about the roles within a relationship, because I think there's a lot of merit to some of those traditional roles.
Yeah.
But I'm not certainly interested in a relationship where the woman in my life isn't thriving. Not that she's
Yeah.
just existing and she's just getting by, but that she's thriving. That's the kind of environment that I want to create, that I failed to create in a lot of ways towards the end of my marriage.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you're right. We probably need to shift that standard a little bit. So your wife confronts you. She drops the D word. You snap into action, and then I think if I'm piecing this together right, it's about 6 months of you putting in the effort. But she's kind of checked out. She's made her decision, and at some point, you guys ultimately decide this is not moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, that wasn't a decision that I made, but it is a decision I had to accept. You know, that's the reality of it. I would not have made that decision if it were up to me, but it was the decision that was made. And so I had to accept that decision. And that was actually a pretty liberating moment. There was a conversation that we had at one point, and she said something, and I'm not going to get into the specifics just out of respect to both of us, actually. But she had said something, and it was very painful, brutally painful for me. And she wasn't even being mean spirited about it. She just said something so bluntly that it kind of hurt. You know, it took me back and stung me a little bit and hurt. And it was at that moment, even in that pain, very dark, that I realized, okay, this is over. Like this is legitimately done. And that was the first time that I had like fully accepted it. I may have been 60, 70, 75% before, but after that sentence, I was like, this is 100%. And even in that darkest time, it was very liberating because I could put a period at the end of the sentence and figure out a way to move forward and move on, which is what I had to do.
Yeah. And I think that's where I want to spend a majority of the conversation today is you have moved forward, you have moved on. And I think, like you said, people are commenting, you know, from the outside looking in, like you've done well for sure. Like you didn't just blow up Order of Man and, you know, become a hermit and get away to Costa Rica for a year or anything. Like you.
That actually sounds pretty nice though. Now that you're saying that.
I mean, it was an option. Yeah, it's still there, I guess, in theory.
Sure.
But you've done well. And like, look, our audience, they understand the impacts of addiction. Maybe not alcoholism, although for some listening or watching, that is the case. But sex addiction, porn addiction, and all the issues that we deal with, and the devastating effects that can have on a marriage, whether it leads to divorce or simply broken trust and having to repair that. So I guess I'd just love to hear, you know, you're a couple of years post the divorce, and what have you been doing to move forward and to keep life going while not ignoring, you know, this massive life change that you've gone through?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the life change, it's just dealing with the reality of finances and logistics of where we live and getting the kids to and from different households, and even working together with somebody who has clear animosity and contention towards you. Like there's a lot that goes to it. And anybody who's been through that knows about the logistics and the planning and the confrontation and all the things that just come with broken relationships. So we can talk about that and what specifically that might look like. But from a personal perspective, for me, it's really been diving into the work. But instead of diving into the work to tell other people how to behave, it's me learning to become a student of the methods that we teach and share. And I think that I allowed my ego and arrogance and pride to get the better of me a couple of years ago, kind of at that peak of where I was. And so I felt like I had to be the perfect person and I had to have it all figured out. And if I didn't, I had to portray that in a certain way. And there's a newfound level of empathy that I have for people over the past couple of years that I didn't have before. I think there's a level of sincere humility around my own inadequacies and shortcomings and how I present myself. I've been certainly more honest about what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And learning to enlist other people, men in particular, to help me with my own struggles. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I was having a struggle, a personal struggle. And there was two men in particular that I was able to just send a text to and say, hey man, I'm having a hard time. Can I just give you a call? And both of these men fielded a call from me. And I don't think I spent any longer than, 15, 20 minutes on the phone with either of them. And that's all it took. It didn't take some long weekend or some confrontation, that they needed to come. It just took a couple of minutes of, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. And they're like, yeah, that sucks. And that's like it. And it was really refreshing to be able to have that. Whereas 2 years ago, I wouldn't have done that. I would have isolated. I would not have shared any of that with anybody. I had people who would have listened, but I just wasn't willing to open up and express it that way. So the biggest thing is just getting back to the systems that we've created and then being honest with people. Like even this morning, I was at the gym and this guy walked in, and I've seen him come in for months at this point, and he's very overweight. He's obese.
Okay.
And I think a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have done this, out loud publicly, but in my head, I would have thought less of him. I would have mocked him in my head or made excuses or reasons why he looks like I would have made up all the things in the world about why this guy is not a good person or something. Right. But today I was like, man, this guy's awesome. Like, yeah, he's overweight. I mean, we can acknowledge reality and he acknowledges it. That's why he's there. But for me to say, but he's in here, he's been here for 2 months. He's working hard. He's doing his thing. Like, I don't know what other issues he's dealing with. Maybe he's dealing with a health condition, and that's what kind of exacerbated his slip into not taking care of his health, or maybe he had an abusive childhood, or maybe he just learned habits from his parents that he just adopted as his own before he really had a choice to decide whether or not he should adopt those practices. And so he's just been living like, I don't know. I just don't know. Even when I drive down the road, somebody cuts you off and of course you get pissed off and everything. But I've noticed even a little bit more empathy with that. Somebody cuts me off. I'm like, maybe their wife just called and he has to go to the hospital because they're having their first baby. Yeah. Or maybe he just didn't see me. Maybe they just didn't see me. Yeah. Or maybe there's an emergency. I don't know. And I'm less likely to jump to conclusions that paint other people as less than or not as good as me or whatever it might be. And I'll tell you, that's a really refreshing way to live. Certainly a lot lighter, a lot, I'm sure, more pleasant to be around, and not so hard on myself either.
Well, I've noticed the compassion in your messaging. Like, I think that's where I'm like, wow, I mean, you and I have known each other for basically 2 years since that first interview. And I feel like I've seen like a real, there's a nice like roundedness, I think, to you and to your messaging. That was there before, but it's just there to a greater degree, which I have to imagine your audience and the guys in the Iron Council really appreciate, because I think, life is hard. We're all going through our challenges, and giving people that benefit of the doubt or the context can really go a long way.
And it's really none of my business what another person's doing anyways, So if I'm going to make up a story about a person, and that's all we're doing, I jump on this podcast, I'm making up stories about you and how you present yourself. And some of them are probably relatively accurate and some are probably way off base. So if I'm just winging it about people I don't know and have no relevancy in my life, I might as well make up something more favorable for them than less favorable. Like, it's just a story anyways.
Yeah, so, it's true. It's true. Yeah. How have you managed the balancing act between, like, you're taking responsibility for your side of it, which I would have expected no less from you anyways, but I do really admire that in you. Like, you're not blame shifting here. There's no name calling, and you're telling your side of the story, which I think is the way it should be. But how do you manage that, and also at the same time not drift into self-pity, the blame spiral, and like the weight of the world, like, oh, my life could be XYZ if I hadn't made all those stupid mistakes. I guess the regret, and the self-pity. Like, how do you manage those two tensions?
Well, how does the phrase go? Anxiety let's see. It's something about anxiety is worrying about the
Your
future,
and depression's about your past, I think.
Yeah. Right. So
Something like that. Yeah.
along those lines, and it'll make sense here in a minute why I bring that up, is because both are pretty largely outside of our control. I mean, what's already happened has happened. There's nothing you can go do to go back and change it. And what's going to happen, we can influence, sure. But how many people, for example, in these LA fires that are taking place right now, 24 hours earlier, had any idea their life was going to be so drastically impacted like that? Of course not. Like, we have such little control over our lives, the ability to influence. And I think we ought to influence in a positive direction, but letting go of things I can't control, letting go of expectations and worries about the future, and then just operating in reality. What's done is done. Coulda, shoulda, woulda doesn't really matter because there's nothing I can do about it anyways. All that I can do is recognize that I didn't do some good things in the past. That's reality. That is set in stone. It is locked in. That book has been written. It is not going to be unwritten. But I can make better decisions moving forward. And I can use those painful lessons and those hardships and even the things that I've done to other people as opportunities to learn and grow from here on out. And then really the bottom line is the only thing that matters is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
This podcast is the only thing that matters. Now I have a schedule. When we get done here, I'm going to pick up my daughter and we're going to lunch, and I have another podcast this afternoon. So it's not like I'm not anticipating what might happen in the future, but right now in this moment, this is the only thing that matters. And I need to show up fully so that I can influence the future for the benefit of me and the people I love.
Yeah, that's good, man. So staying present.
That's it. And again, staying present is important. And I'm not saying don't think about the future. Think about the future, but then work it backwards into what you can do today. So for example, we'll take this gentleman at the gym. If he's saying to himself, well, I'd like to lose 50 pounds. That's good. That's ambitious. That's going to make you healthier. It's going to give you energy. It's going to make you feel more confident. There's a lot of good in that. Most planning stops there. Like, I'd like to be there someday. Well, no, work back. And he's done that. He's worked backwards into what he can do today. And the only thing that he can do today is to get into the gym and work towards that goal and objective. And then tomorrow we'll worry about it then.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, it's funny. I was actually reading that in the Bible yesterday. I just needed something to kind of calm my mind down. And it's like that where Jesus talks about like, who can add 1 cubit to their stature by worrying about tomorrow? Like, today has enough to worry about. Just worry about today. Tomorrow will take care of itself. And I think that's a lesson we probably all need to learn, especially in like our technology crazy kind of society.
The framework that I've really liked along those same lines is that what you're experiencing today is a result of what you did yesterday.
Interesting.
So it's the same concept. It's just looking backwards in the timeline instead of forward.
Kind of integrating it though. Yeah.
Right. So if you think about, okay, do I like where I live right now? Like, not physically necessarily, but do I like my life as it is right now? And I think for most of us, hopefully most of us would say yes to some things. And then it's likely we'd say, well, no, I'm not completely satisfied in that department. Okay, well, whatever you're experiencing right now is a result of decisions that you made in the past. So if that's true and you want a better future, then it's safe to assume that I need to make good decisions today so that tomorrow is determined off what I did today and it's favorable rather than less favorable.
Yeah, if you can kind of see how they all intersect, it gives a lot more value to right now. Otherwise, it's easy to brush off right now because it doesn't matter.
Well, most people will. They'll be like, "Oh, I'll start the diet tomorrow," or you know, I've got months. You know, I've got months to prepare for that thing, that speaking engagement, or that presentation I have to give at the office. I have months. I'll do it tomorrow. It's always tomorrow, and then before you know it, your presentation's here, and you're not prepared, and you're cramming, and you do an inferior job, and you wonder why nobody respects you or why you're not getting the promotion. It's a result of all the things you did yesterday.
Yeah, it's true. And it doesn't mean you don't have to do, like, you can only do so many things in a day, but when the mentality is, I'll do it later, that's different than even saying, okay, let me look and see, like, when can I do this in the next week or two so that I at least get a move on it, right? Like, it's just having that, like, proactive, tackling things head on in the moment kind of thing.
Or you might say, instead of saying, I'll do it later, there might be certain elements in your life where you just say, I'm not going to do that at all. That's not important to me. And I think that's just as important as acknowledging what is. Because men who we want to be men of value, right? So because that's the case, we will say yes to everything, every opportunity, every request for our time, energy, and attention. We'll say yes to everything because we want to be valuable people, which I think is great. It's noble. It's righteous to want to be valuable. But if you can identify, instead of saying, oh, I'll do that later or someday, or just say, that's not important to me. And then just live with that. There's things that I've said that I've wanted to do in the past that I haven't done. I'm like, why haven't I done these things? It's because I don't want to do them. That's the only reason. So now I get better at identifying, okay, here's an opportunity, or here's a thing that presented itself, or here's an activity I'd like to engage in, or at least think I do, but that's not a priority. I'm not willing to put forth the work in order to achieve that thing. And so I just write it off and then just focus on the things that I do actually want in life.
Which is also very liberating, right? Just to know these are the things I'm saying yes to. And those things maybe in another season, maybe never. But right now it's a no. So I can focus on the things I'm saying yes to.
Yeah. And I think men need to get better at doing that, of saying no without even trying to really rationalize or explain it to people. Like, you don't owe people an explanation for it. In fact, the more you explain, I think the less beneficial it is for you.
True.
You know, if somebody asks you to do something and you don't want to do it, say, no, I'm not interested in doing that.
Yeah. Or
yeah.
You don't know them an explanation.
I mean, that's it. That no is a complete sentence, as they say. And that's just fine. It's when you start to rationalize it, like, no, here's what I say sometimes. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Well, that's not true. I absolutely can do that, but I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So it's more honest to say no, or no, thank you, or I'll pass, than it is to say, oh, I can't do that. Well, now you're saying you're not in control of your time, and you're not in control of your schedule, and you're not in control of your activities and the things that you do in your life. And that isn't true. So take charge of what you will do and what you won't do.
So this is me asking for business advice, not so secretly now. But as Order of Man has grown, because the podcast is still very large. The Iron Council, you guys have 1,000+ members in there that you're managing and leading. How have you does it get easier to say no as things have grown? Like, how have you figured that out? And also, like, in a season like this right now, how do you decide what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to?
Specifically as it relates to the business is what you're asking?
Yeah, now I'm asking. I suppose, if you have some concepts that we can expand beyond, that's great. But I'm curious from a business standpoint.
One thing I am fairly good at, and I don't know if I've always been this, I haven't always been this way, but I think this comes with the lessons in humility over the past couple of years, is I had a lot of guys stick by me when I was going through all that. And they really didn't have any reason to. In fact, if anything, they had reason not to, but they stuck around. And they helped me with the business, and they helped with the Iron Council, and they picked up where I slacked, and they called and they checked in on me. And I really began to realize that not only are these good men and good friends, but they're tremendous sources of value to me personally, but also professionally. And they want to be involved. Many of them volunteer. I didn't ask them to do anything, but they volunteered and they stepped up in big ways. And I've realized, I've always known this, but I've actually realized and applied this lately, is that there's guys within our organization who are significantly better at things than I am. And so it might be a no, or it might be, no, I'm not going to do that. But if it's something that I think would be advantageous for the business, then I am fine. In fact, I'm ecstatic to be able to call one of these guys up and say, hey, you're really good at this. I would like you to do this. Would you like to head this up? And giving other people the opportunity to share their knowledge and apply their value has been good. And then there's other things where it's, hey, we're not going to do that. Either the timing's off, or that's not something of interest to me. And I've had a lot of people, everybody has an idea for what I should do with Order of Man and what I shouldn't do. And to those people, if it doesn't align with what I want, and I have a vision for what we're trying to accomplish, then I usually will. If you said to me, hey, Ryan, you should do this thing, and it wasn't aligned with what I wanted to do, I would answer back in a respectful way, you should do that thing.
Yeah, right.
Like, if you notice this is a problem, or this is something that's missing, or something you think would be a good idea, you do it. It would be better for you to do it than it is. Not only is it better for you, you're the one that believes in it. It's better for me because I have other plans. And I've just realized I'm not here to save everybody. I'm not here to be everything to everybody. This is what we do. This is how we do it. This is the men we appeal to. And there's plenty of other places and opportunities for other people to go that aren't aligned with our niche, what it is we do.
Yeah, I love that. I've caught myself doing that with my team even sometimes as well, where they're like, hey, what are we going to do about this? And I'm like, yeah, what are you going to do about this? Like just it's like, if you care about it, you clearly care about it way more than I do. So it's probably better that you do it anyway, but also just knowing like what you can and can't do. I like that, man.
Well, part of also, Sathiya, if I can say one other thing on that, I know you want to get to some other topics, but I can't remember how it goes with Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. What does he call it? Self-employed, right? Self-employed individuals are the ones who they trade their time for money. So they're literally doing everything. They're the janitor, they're the salesman, they're the marketer, they're the product development team, they're the product delivery team, they're everything. And when guys like you and I and other people who are listening to this podcast get started, we're all self-employed. There's a difference when you want to grow something that you have and you want to leverage it and make it scalable and make it reach a wide audience of people. You have to move out of the self-employed mentality. And that's a little bit about where we are right now, where I don't want to be a self-employed individual. I want to be a business owner.
Yeah.
And business owners create systems that they hire people to utilize and to follow and to carry out.
Yeah.
And I'm finding myself moving more from that self-employed to that business owner category. And I've also noticed, because they say you have to work on your business, not in your business.
Yeah, right.
I've also noticed that in a lot of ways, some of my role and responsibility in this organization is to temper everybody's expectations.
Yeah.
I have a good group of guys who always have ideas and have thoughts. And I love that because it means they're vested in it. It means they care about it. It means they have innovation. And a lot of the time it's me saying, hey, look, good idea. That's Q4. Hey, look, not a great idea. Here's why. It's like you start regulating and managing people and ideas more than just this visionary and always having these constant ideas, because that's how I used to be. And now it's like, well, hold on, that's a good idea. So out of every 10 or 11 ideas, it's like, oh, that one actually, we can implement that right now. Who should implement that? You should, because you're really good in that department.
Yeah. Yeah. Smart. It makes a lot of sense. I'm shifting gears a little bit, but it is kind of tied in. But I wanted to ask, like, what has kept you motivated, or what's motivating you these days? And just to contextualize this a bit, I'm thinking about your wife says she wants a divorce. It kind of like gobsmacks you. You get into therapy, you join AA. Most guys listening who have been married, who have some sort of struggle with pornography or an addiction, they've all had this window, right? Where it's like, I'm super motivated because if I don't take care of this problem, I'm going to lose something that's really valuable. Like the pain is imminent. You can almost taste it. And so again, we're all very motivated when we're being confronted with that level of pain. But then often we find with guys that go through our program, we find like, okay, you're motivated to get your wife back. We will accept that for the time being. That's fine. If that's motivating you, we're going to leverage it. But we know at some point this has to evolve beyond that, because you can't actually fully control the outcome of, your marriage or anything else. Like we need it to be a little bit more centered on what are things that you can fully control, and that being more your motivation. And that is like a gradual progression. It looks different for everyone. But I guess I'm just curious for you, because now that we're talking about business, I'm just thinking like, your business has been around for a long time. You're very reputable. You've had a very consistent group in the Iron Council that continues to grow. So I guess I'm just curious, like on all fronts, personally and professionally, what's motivating you these days, especially with some of the stuff you've gone through the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, let's address the professional one first. That seems to be the easiest for most men, I think. And in a lot of ways, it is for me, that's for sure. And it's because it's quantifiable. That's it.
Yeah.
When you look at being a better business owner, for example, just look at sales. There you go.
Right.
There's a pretty easy metric to determine if you're being a success or not, right?
Yeah.
But if somebody's like, well, I want to be a better father. Great. That's good. What does that even mean? Does that mean you're more present with your kids? You're having better conversations. You're coaching their little league teams. You're going to their dance recitals. You're reading them books at night. You're saying prayers together. You're taking them to church. It could mean a lot of different things, but what exactly do you mean? Same thing with being a better husband. I just want to have a good relationship and be a better husband. Cool. I like that. What do you mean? I don't know. I just want it to be better. Well, that's the problem. If you can't quantify it, then you just won't really do anything about it. We've got this battle planning system that we use. And there's a quote in here, and I don't know if you can see that or if it's backwards or not, but it says this, it says that which is measured improves. So if you want to improve anything, I know you guys do, I can't remember the term. You don't track streaks.
Yeah. We track trends.
Slips, trends.
We track trends.
But what do you call it when somebody slips or
slip. Yeah. They have to track that every day. Yeah. Did they slip or not? Yeah.
So you might not be tracking what conventional wisdom says, like, I did 17 days. Without, right.
Yeah.
But you're still tracking because 100%. You have to track. If this guy at the gym wants to lose weight, he has to get on the scale every day. If you want to pay off debt, you have to pull up your bank accounts and your credit card statements. You have to track those things. So anyways, to go back to it professionally, it's very easy for me. And this is where I'm going to be a little counterintuitive to what I just said. It's very easy for me to rattle off like a mission statement. Like for example, we build men and give them the tools to be better fathers, husbands, business owners, and community leaders. Like I could regurgitate that very simply. And that's important. Like you have to know what it is you do, and then you can measure everything against that. But what keeps me motivated, which was your question, was not that phrase. It's what that actually means. So we just did a transformation challenge. It was a 6-month physical transformation challenge. And the guys were supposed to submit a before picture. And then by December 31st, they had to submit an after picture. And then everybody in the Iron Council voted on who had the best physical transformation.
Oh, that's sick. Cool.
And for every person that was in on the contest, it was a $500 buy-in. So not insignificant. Wow. So we had 25 guys sign up, me and 24 other guys, all pitched in $500. And the concept, the idea was that the winner would take all. Whoever won would win $12,500.
Dang.
So a couple of weeks ago, we wrapped this up, December 31st, we wrapped this up. And a gentleman by the name of Brad Peterson won. I got his before and after picture. I'm like, oh, that guy won, even before we all voted.
Okay.
And I put it out to the guys, and I think we had 500 votes, maybe a few under 500 on how many people voted. And Brad won. And I sent him a check for $12,500. And I said, what are you going to do with that $12,500? He said, well, the first thing I'd like to do is give the second and third place winners their money back. And then I would like to give a little bit of money to, his name's Johnny Loretti. He was the one, he's a physical trainer, and he's going to give a little money to him for helping him. And then he was going to help his, some family members with a few things. He was going to tie the portion of that to his church because they do a lot of community work, a little bit of an upgrade on one of his vehicles. And then the rest, he was going to power down some debt. When guys, I can get emotional actually when I see it, because when guys do those things, that's what motivates me. I had another guy, he sent me a picture and he's like, his name's Scott. And he's like, hey, Ryan, my goal is to fit into this jacket. And he had his military jacket on, and he had this white t-shirt on and this jacket. And there was like 4 inches, like he could not close it. You could just see a big patch of white from his t-shirt because he couldn't close his jacket. Okay. And maybe about a month and a half ago, he sends me a picture, and all it says, I'll get emotional on this one. All it says is, I did it. And it was a picture of him in his jacket, his military jacket from probably 25 years ago. And he fits in it. He looks sharp. He looks incredible. It looks like a tailored suit. And those are the things that motivate me. It's not the mission statement. It's when people actually do work. And then I can see that, oh, the work we're doing actually matters in people's lives, like relevant in people's lives.
Yeah.
So that's the professional
over here too, man.
And it's, I mean, you probably feel the same way when you have a guy who's addicted to pornography and his wife is on the brink of maybe separation or divorce, and he goes through your programs and you teach him these tools. And now, maybe things aren't perfect, but he's like, hey, my wife moved back in, or my wife and I had a good conversation and she sees the progress. And, or maybe, hey, we're intimate for the first time in months because I'm rebuilding that level of trust and connection with her. Like if I'm you, those are the things that would motivate me.
Yeah. Oh, dude. Yeah. Well, yeah. As you're saying that, you're reminding me of, we even had a similar story. We had a guy who quit porn and was doing really well. And then he sent us a message, like, I think he was 18 months clean post our program. And he had run like 2,200 miles because one of his goals was always to run in an ultra marathon. And this happens with a lot of guys. They quit porn and then they start to like have a higher value for themselves and their bodies. They want to take better care of their bodies. And so he had just finished his second half marathon and had run all these miles and was just like, living his best life. Right. And you're right. It's the transformations that make it worth it. There's something about guys like having a goal and accomplishing that specific, like that picture of the military. Like I can see like the
so
gap
cool.
between, and then you get that picture a couple months later and the jacket's buttoned up and I'm like, oh dude, that is for real. That's really cool.
Yeah. So that's on the professional side. On the personal side for me, I've been dating a woman for a little over a year. So building that relationship up, connecting with her, taking things where they need to go, learning more about each other, helping her achieve her goals. She's great at telling me like it is. And so learning from her on things that maybe I'm not as comfortable with or accustomed to, having some of that. And then with my kids, it's
can I pause you there just for a sec?
Yeah.
Sorry, before you get into your kids, how did you know you were ready to date again?
I don't know if I would say I was ready necessarily, but I didn't place any expectations on it.
Okay.
I think that's where guys get into trouble is they say, well, how do I know if I'm ready to date again? Well, you don't need to be ready to marry somebody. You don't
Right.
need to be ready for a girlfriend or have some commitment or whatever else. That's not actually why I started dating personally. When I started dating again, it was just to enjoy the company of women and to have some companionship, even if it was over dinner that didn't necessarily go so well because we didn't have a connection. There was some boredom. I didn't have my kids half the time. So yeah, like it wasn't really an idea that I need to get a girlfriend or I need to get married again. Or I didn't have I didn't need to get laid. Like it wasn't that for me.
Yeah.
So I didn't place any sort of weird expectations on, am I ready or not? Ready for what? Ready to have dinner with a woman? Like, that's all I want to do. Like, you're ready for that at any point in your life. Like, that's not a real high threat activity. At least I don't think it is. So
yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's cool. I know, I just know people that have gone through this and have gotten in their heads, and are like a little bit too gun shy, so that's why I think it sounds like it was maybe about a year or so that you were single before you met her and started going out with her. So I was just curious what the process was there. Cause that's cool.
And I dated somebody else before too. So it wasn't like she's the first person that I've dated. But yeah, this goes back to the anxiety thing where, when a guy's like that, and look, you might not be ready. You might be still have emotional ties to your ex. There might still be a lot of, I hesitate to use the word baggage, but emotional turmoil. There might be some trauma in that a little bit too. Like if you're experiencing that, yeah, you're probably not ready to date per se, but to go on a date, and maybe not. I don't know. You can determine that. But there comes a point in time where if a guy's like feeling it, but he's like, but I don't know, then just take a woman on a date. That's what I would say. Yeah. If you're like, well, I'd like to date, but I don't know if I'm ready. Yeah, you might not be. I remember the very first date I went on after I went through my divorce. It was fine. It was fine. It was a great date, but it was so awkward because not the date itself, but I was like looking around. I felt like I was cheating on my wife because I'd been with her for 20 years.
Yeah.
So I'm at dinner with this other woman and I'm like looking around. I'm like, I hope nobody sees me or nobody I know sees me. Like that was an awkward part of it.
Yeah.
But my expectation was just dinner. There's nothing to be anxious about having dinner with a woman.
Yeah.
It's when you start thinking about, well, like, what if she doesn't like me? And what if we want to get married someday? Whoa, dude, it's just dinner. That's it's okay. So I would suggest somebody in that boat, if you're thinking, I'd like to date again, but I don't know if I'm ready, just go out with a couple of women. It's not that big a deal and lower the expectation.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it takes the pressure off. So I interrupted you. So that's what's going on with the relationship. And then with your kids?
With the kids, rebuilding relationships, reconnecting with them, being present with them. I really enjoy figuring out ways to connect with them in ways that I haven't before. So for example, last night, my daughter and I cooked dinner together. She's hit or miss. Sometimes she's like, yeah, I want to cook dinner with you. And other times she's like, no, I want to paint my nails or draw. Yeah, and that's cool. I don't push too hard on it, but last night I pushed a little bit on it last night. She's like, fine, I'll do it. And she came in and about halfway through us preparing the meal, she's like, Dad, I'm having a lot of fun. Aww. And that's the motivation. Or, my oldest son had his lacrosse parent athlete coach meeting last night. And so to be able to go to that meeting and see him develop and him talk about his goals. He wants to be an All-American lacrosse player. Those are his goals over the next 2 years.
Sick.
Like to see that and then to be part of that, for Christmas, I got him these gloves that he really wanted that are all the joints articulate. It's something I'm not necessarily interested in, but he loves it. And he got those. He's like, oh man, he was so excited about it. And so
that's cool
to see the passion in that, or even just spending time with my youngest boy. And just about every morning when he's here, sometimes I have a morning call, or I'll get back from the gym and I come home and he's like, Dad, can we go build Lego? I'm like, sure. So we go build together. It's just finding little ways to just be present. When I'm done with this conversation with you, I take one of my kids every single week to lunch. So my daughter and I, it's her turn. So we're going to lunch this afternoon together, and they pick the restaurants, little things like that where we can connect. I enjoy the challenge of figuring out how to do that and then actually being present in the time I have with them.
I love that, man. I think that's amazing. I'm sure those relationships have become, that much more valuable with everything that's taking place.
Much better for all of us, for sure. Yeah.
In your new relationship with the girl that you're dating, what's like one or two things that you're trying to do differently, or do more of, or do less of? Like, is there anything that you reflect back and you say, man, I wish I would have done more of this. I'm going to try now in this relationship to do more of, or to set my relationship up for success?
I do want to say, point of clarification, and I don't actually think it's just semantics. I don't know why this is the case, but I never use the word girl. I always use the word woman. So I just a point of clarification. I hear people do that. I'm like, she's not a girl. And it's not like it's I don't think it's weird. I'm like, no, that's a woman. Like, she's a woman. She's your woman. She's with you. Like, I don't know. That's just a thing. So
no, fair. I just fair. Yeah. We're not boys. We're men. So I think that's totally fair. Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of things though. Number one is lowering my level of codependency on her, or just women in general, is really working on not taking her emotions on as my own. That I'm only in a good mood, for example, if she's in a good mood, or if she's in a bad mood, then I'm in a bad mood. Like that should be independent of each other. I'm not saying I'm not ever in a bad mood, but it's independent of her mood. At least I am working on that. Yeah. So if she's having a bad day, I'm not going to let that impact my attitude. I can still I'm allowed to have a good day. And I actually also, here's something that's beneficial. I don't need to solve her bad day. Like, she can have a bad day. She's a grown woman. She can have a bad day. She's old enough and mature enough and intelligent enough to figure it out herself. If she wants my advice, she can ask me. Other than that, she can figure it out. And I'm trying to give her the space to be able to figure that out on her own. And she likes to do that anyway. So she's actually helping in a lot of ways me understand those concepts. Not like reacting when she says something or does something that I don't like or isn't my favorite. Acknowledging it, sure, but not reacting, not letting myself lose my cool. Just being.
That's a big one. I think it's a big one for men.
Huge. Yeah, huge. Yeah. Because it just doesn't help. Like, let's say your wife says something to you, maybe even she's making jabs, like legitimate jabs, and pokes at you for whatever reason. Like, she's legitimately doing that. If you let that get to you, it's only going to make the situation worse, because now you're going to start doing it to her, or you're going to get all personally offended and, get upset and get emotional. And then that's going to create more rifts and contention and whatever you might be dealing with in the micro, and of course the macro as well. It's fine. Like, I'm not saying don't have boundaries. If she says something to you that's inappropriate, that's a boundary of yours, then I think you owe it to her and yourself to say, hey, I won't be treated like that. And we've certainly had discussions like that over a year where it's like, sure, hey, why are we yelling? Like, I'm not going to yell. Or you seem upset right now. I'm not going to fight with you. We can talk about things, but I'm not going to fight about it. And that probably at times might be a little bit frustrating for her, especially if she wanted to or whatever it might be. Yeah. But I don't really care. I'm not interested in going down that route. Like, I'm not gonna fight. I'll uphold my boundaries and I'll speak up when I need to, but I'm not gonna fight about it.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then when I think there's an issue that needs to be brought up, I'm gonna bring it up.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sit on things. I'm not gonna pretend that I don't have my own goals and desires. I'm not gonna change a perspective or a viewpoint just because it doesn't happen to align with hers. I'm completely comfortable with having differing opinions on a few things. They're not deal breakers. They're not value differences. They're just differences in, the way we might see how somebody handled a situation or how we personally handled a situation. But I'm not going to change my opinion just because she has a differing perspective. But a lot of guys will. It's like they follow their women around like little puppy dogs and waiting to get rewarded with a little treat if they do and say the right things and they're obedient, good little boys. Not only is that just a horrible way for a man to live, it's actually repulsive to women. It's fun to have a little lapdog for a while, but very quickly women get very tired of babying little men who are acting like little boys. For me, having a spine, having a backbone, but being able to share that and articulate that with grace and class and respect towards her.
That's good, man. So, okay, you're talking about men having a spine. I'm really glad you brought this up because I did want to ask you about this really quick, and maybe I'll have to get you back and we can talk more about it. But I don't know if you felt this shift. Like the last maybe 4 or 5 years, it's kind of been bad to be a guy, right? It's bad to be a guy. Men are bad. Obviously, like we know what's been going on politically and some of the agendas that are being driven. And then I feel like there's been this shift just like in the last, I don't know, I guess couple of weeks, maybe month or so. Even you look at some of the like new movies on Netflix and like a lot more conservative values, a lot more like it's like it kind of feels like it's more okay to be a man again. Have you felt this at all? Are you observing this at all in your community?
Yeah, 100%. It's a course correction is what it is. It went so far the other way that the pendulum is swinging back. When you operate inside, you're familiar with the Overton window?
No, I don't think so.
So the Overton window is a window or a parameters in which it's acceptable to act. So we have, for example, an Overton window with our kids, right? So even if it's unspoken, there's an Overton window around, let's just isolate bedtime. Let's say bedtime's 9:00. The Overton window, a kid could push a little bit further and say, hey, Dad, can I have till 9:05? And you're like, yeah, sure. 9:05, sure. We're playing a game. It's just outside of the Overton window where it's like acceptable. But if your kid says, Dad, can I stay up till 10:00 tonight? It's so far outside of the Overton window that you're like, no, you cannot stay up till 10:00. But what happens, and I'm just using this as a silly example, but what happens with this Overton window is your kid says, Dad, can I stay up till 9:05? And you're like, yeah, 9:05. No, not a big deal. And then tomorrow night he says, Dad, can I stay up till 9:05 again? You're like, no, it's bedtime. You're like, but Dad, you let me stay up last night till 9:05. It's like, yeah, you're right. Okay, you can stay up till 9:05. And then on the weekends, he might say, hey, Dad, it's the weekend. The movie's not over yet. Can we do like 9:15? He's not deliberately doing this, by the way. He is being manipulative. Is human tendency. Right. He's being manipulative for sure, but he doesn't know he's doing it. And so you're like 9:15. Yeah, it's the weekend. And before you know it, he's got you till 10:00 on the regular. And so we can shift the Overton window slightly. But if the Overton window gets shifted too far too quickly, then that's when people notice and they say, nope, and they draw the line. That's what you're seeing. You've seen people reject it, and now they're saying, no, that's horrible. We need to go back to what it was before. And that's what you're seeing now. You're seeing the pendulum swing and the Overton window get shifted back a little bit to where it was before.
Yeah, I feel like it's, I mean, yeah, there's still more to go. I'm surprised at how quickly it's shifting, but I think it's the day and age we live in, like between like tech, like information obviously spreads very quickly, and I don't know, but the Overton window, I was wondering if, as you explained it, maybe I would recognize it. I haven't heard that concept before, certainly not that way. So is there anything for like, I guess I'm just thinking if we are shifting back, the pendulum swinging back, is there such a thing as making sure that you don't switch too far back the other way? Or is this just human reality? We just keep going back and forth. Is that just how it is?
It's a bit like an accordion effect, I actually talk a lot about this with nice guys. It's a little bit of a different context, but I think this will give some framework for it. When I often say this, when there's a nice guy who wants to figure out how to be more assertive in his life and how to have boundaries and communicate boundaries and get respect, those sorts of things. What I often tell guys is you have to tiptoe into territory. You have to.
Yeah.
Because you don't have an appropriate level of awareness around what is full and what is a nice guy. You don't know what it is.
They've drawn the line so short that when they cross it, they're actually still in nice guy territory and they don't realize it.
And they think they're being a complete people when it's like, no, you're just being genuine, honest, and respectful. And
Yeah.
a lot of people would see it that way, but they feel very uncomfortable. And so that's what happens is, in order to compensate for something, we have to overcompensate the other way.
The other way, yeah.
And then the forces of culture between the way people see things and the way that we apply them and the results they produce. You know, for example, DEI took a major hit. I mean, it's under a major attack right now, which I think is a good thing as a result of what's happening in LA. There is a lot of DEI initiatives within the Los Angeles Fire Department, and it's all being brought to light now. And so it's going to shift the other way. And this is why I would suggest that if you're leading a movement or an initiative or a business, that you understand where the Overton window is. And I actually don't think it's a bad idea to push up against and even over the Overton window a little bit. That's a cultural movement that moves the culture in the right direction. I would like to, whether I'm accurate about this or not, to think that we have a small part to play in restoring masculinity to its rightful place.
Yeah.
But if I would have taken it so far to the extreme, a great example of that is somebody like Andrew Tate, who's under a lot of heat right now. That guy has taken it. He's moved the Overton window so far out of the realm of what is currently acceptable that he's now being a little bit, and I think this will happen more and more, it's being rejected. And we'll see it more and more, even though 2 years ago it was fully embraced.
That's a great example because he's literally exploiting his very followers, right? With like all kinds of seedy stuff behind closed doors. But yeah,
I also think there's, and this is, look, we don't need to get necessarily real political on this, but there is a Trump effect. I mean, there is.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Whether you agree with it or not, or like the guy or not, there is a huge Trump effect, and that effect is in full force right now. And so this is why you have guys like Mark Zuckerberg. Let's not pretend he's a principled person. Somebody had made the suggestion the other day that they would like to see him go through some process in order for them to feel comfortable in believing in what he's saying. It was Jack Donovan. He's like, and I don't know what he's referencing exactly, but he was talking about 12 points of repentance or something. I can't remember exactly what he was referring to, but I said, how about 12 years of the consistent messaging that he's putting out? That's 3 presidential cycles. And then after that, then I'll believe you.
Right.
But it's not that he's principled. It's that it's no longer acceptable to hold the views that he was holding just 6 months ago. The Overton window has shifted, and Trump is shifting that Overton window back to another place that it hasn't been for decades.
Yeah. And it like for me, so again, I'm in Canada, so there's just some dynamics about America that I don't even know because I'm not an American resident.
Right. Yeah.
But it's definitely, for me, it's really solidified just how impactful American culture is on really like the global climate, even to like ideologies, because the media does follow, like whatever's in power, everything is going to kind of cater to that because the American government is just it's so influential, it's so significant. So I was just going to wrap this all up by saying this is why I'm so grateful for you, man. And I love what you're doing, like really trumpeting a very healthy community that's centered around incredible values that I think are just going to stand the test of time. I don't know how long you're planning to be in this, but I think as long as you're in this space, man, you're going to be such a mover and shaker. And I just, we really have a lot of respect for you over here. So thanks for your time. If people want to go check you out or find more about what you're up to, what's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, orderofman.com is our home base, or the Order of Man podcast. You're going to find out a lot about what we do there. If you want to connect with me on more of a personal level, I'm very active over on Instagram at Ryan Michler. And between those 3 places, you'll find events and books and podcasts and all sorts of things.
You got it. Yeah, we'll put the links in the show notes. Great chatting with you again, man.
You too, man. Great to see you. Thanks for the opportunity. I love your community as well and what you guys are doing. And so anxious to have you be more of a part of it.